So we're going to be learning how to do some higher level advanced techniques in dotloop today. What you guys were initially taught, and if we have any seasoned people on the call, veteran agents on the call, you guys all have some really basic foundational, this is how to use dotloop kind of knowledge. But what I'm going to teach you today are a bunch of little tips and tricks and things that you can do and create and set up for yourself that's going to make your life so much easier and faster. And we all know how fast we need to throw offers together in today's market. So anything that I can help you guys with getting prepared for ahead of time, the better. And also it's a lot less data entry for you, and therefore making your contracts more accurate moving forward. So I have an agenda we're going to cover today. I want you guys to try to stay focused on what I'm doing on the screen. This is one of those classes where I'm going to be teaching you like a bunch of different concepts and a lot of different things. It's not something you're going to be able to remember every single trick that I teach you this time. So I want you to jot down what speaks most directly to you for this particular session, what's going to help you immediately, and do those things. And then if you need to sit back through a second time to pick up the rest of it or to tweak it, I would suggest doing that also. So it's dotloop is never a one and done kind of situation. Okay. So the very first thing that I want to teach you guys is how to create your own templates. So you know that when you are going to write an offer or you're getting ready to prepare for a listing, you'll go into dotloop and you will be pulling from whatever your office admin level template is. They've already created a whole listing package for you. They've already created a whole buyer package for you. And it does include a lot of forms, some of which you probably don't want to use and don't care to have in your folder every single time. And also, they're in whatever order your admin put them in, and they're named whatever your admin names them. So, Chip, can you, thank you. And so you may want to have the opportunity to kind of adjust that, change the names of things, even pre-fill some of the forms. So let's talk about how to do that first. It's going to make your life so much faster. Make sure I'm in the right place and on the right screen. As usual, it is questionable. All right, let's share screen. All right, so when I am logged into my dotloop account, the place where I'm going to be heading is directly to the templates library. So I don't need to be in a loop. I don't need to do anything like that. I'm actually going and adjusting the templates that already exist. So top right icon. And then when I do that, all of the different templates are, the libraries of them are over here on the left-hand side. So you can see we have like the PA all docs, the Maryland all docs, whoever's on the call. You can see that there is, for my area, is called the PA listing packet, the PA buyer packet. And you also have a personal folder that it just defaults to when you come in. We're not going to mess with the personal folder. If you want to add documents in there, I would suggest putting documents that you're like looking for frequently, that you want to grab really fast, maybe like cost sheets or change in terms addendums or things like that, that you don't want to have to search PA all docs for and you want quick access to. Those would be perfect for your personal folder. What we're going to do is we're going to hit this button here that says new folder. And I'm going to start with the listing folder first, just so that it gives me more opportunity to pre-fill documents for you. Okay, so I'm going to name the folder, you can name it whatever you like. It's not going to the public. It is just for you to use alone. Nobody else can see it. So I can call this my listing documents. Okay, and create the folder. All right, so now I know that I'm in it. I can see it here on the left-hand side. I can see that I'm in it because that's the name of it over here. And then instead of pulling documents in one at a time, I'm going to cheat the system a little bit. And I'm going to take what the office admin has already created for me and pull it into my own and make the adjustments there as needed. All right, so I'm going to pull my documents from an existing template. So I'll do that and I'll come down here and I'm going to pull from the PA listing packet. And I can select all of them from here because I can continue to make adjustments in a larger screen. This is really small and it's hard to see and find the stuff that I want. So I'm just going to pull everything over initially and hit copy. Now in my area, that is 21 listing documents. Your area might have some different number and that's totally okay. It just depends on what your admin felt was important and necessary to be in the listing packet. So now you can see that my listing documents template has all these different forms in it now that I took from the original office level listing packet. Y'all with me on that? Anyone lost? Okay. At this point, now I can adjust this template to be exactly the way I want it. Stephanie likes it in a certain order with specific kinds of names and with specific forms. So let's say I don't want this particular document. I don't need it. I don't need the reminder. There is a 3-dot menu, an ellipses to the far right on each line item. So I can delete that out of here. Okay. In my case, I have 2 different versions of the estimated cost sheet and I don't need that. So I'm going to reduce it down to 1. Yours probably won't have that issue. Okay, and then I can continue to come down and look to see, are there other forms in here that I probably wouldn't use and don't need to use? Our wire fraud notice, for example, is in front of every single one of our contracts. So I really don't need it to be an additional separate line item. Okay. It's unlikely in my area that I would be using an alternated designated agent addendum. I don't need that on every one of my listings. Okay, and so on and so forth. The other thing that you can do once you have removed the documents that you don't want is that if there are documents that you would like to have in here and you're not typically getting it from your admin level packet, you can go ahead and continue to pull other documents in from your templates or from your own computer. So if there's something that you traditionally like to give to your sellers that is not part of a packet, you can pull it in. Other things I can do, notice how as I'm hovering over one of the documents, I get the crosshairs. It allows me to move things and change the order. So let's say that I want this to be in a more organized fashion. So I'm pulling consumer notice to be the first. And then maybe I feel like the listing contract should come right after that. And then anything that's kind of like an addendum to the listing contract, such as the coming soon addendum, may come right after that. Perhaps then I would want the seller cost sheet and so on and so forth. Maybe I want the seller property disclosure and lead-based paint to go more towards down the bottom or potentially up towards the top if I'm planning on printing those first and handing them to my seller. So it really depends on what your preferences are for how these are organized. Okay. Other things that you can do while you are creating your template is change the names of everything. Don't you just love how everything is named PA dash, PA dash? And I don't know about you, but when I'm really looking for something quickly in my folder, I find that it's really hard sometimes to like see it because of all of the PAs. And, you know, if you're in Maryland, all of the Maryland, the MDs. Okay, so I could potentially come in here and you only ever have to do this one time because it's always going to be that way. So I'm going to hit this, I'm going to hit rename. Okay, and I can highlight that and take it away. And I can really shorten up the names of all of these different forms. And yeah, it's going to take me a minute to do it right now, but I will never have to do it again so long as I'm using my own template. Okay. I'll just do one more of them so it'll really stand out to you when we take it to the next level. Okay, so A, I can move things around. B, I can delete things that I don't want and put things in so that it always stays that way. And then I can also change the names of the documents here before his final save. Okay. The last thing that I think is going to be really, really helpful to you guys is that you can actually pre-fill some of these forms ahead of time to reduce the data entry that you have to do when you're putting a listing together. So let's open the listing contract from our templates, because what I do to this listing contract is what's going to show up every time I pull these documents into one of my listing loops. So here's the listing contract. I'm probably not going to pre-fill anything up here in my broker name or in my name because that's going to come in during the autofill process anyway, since I'm going to be attached to the transaction. So I don't need to do it here, but I could. All right, but what I can do is fill out all of these other fields that pretty much never change from seller to seller to seller. And the listing contract I did on purpose first because it has a lot of fields that we can pre-fill. So for example, line number 14, does the seller have a listing contract with another broker? Typically not, so I can have that pre-filled. Okay, the dates I can't, that's going to be property specific, but my fee never changes. Okay, so if I'm putting in the standard amounts, and in my area might be a little bit different than your area, but I can have that pre-filled so that as soon as my listing contract goes into one of my loops, I don't have to type that in. It's already there. Okay, I can make things bolded. I can change the way that they're centered into the fields. All that stuff can be adjusted. And carrying on here, all of these areas are all the same, seller after seller after seller. If for some reason things were different, it's okay. It would just come over with these fields pre-filled, but they're not concrete. You could go back and adjust them on a per transaction level. Okay, then I'll hit save. I'm going to use my back arrow to go back out to where I was adjusting my templates. And then when I'm looking at the My Listing Documents template, you can see all of the labels have been changed. And if I were to open the listing contract, you would see where I had pre-filled some of those documents. Now I can do the exact same thing for my buyers. So I can have a buyer packet named for myself, exact same process, pull everything in, make it in the order you want, fill out the forms that you want. The buyer agency, for example, is perfect. Then you'd never really have to put anything in there. It's automatic. Okay. There are a couple of other ideas too. There you could do a pre-listing packet if you wanted to, something that would include the lead-based paint disclosure and the seller property disclosure for like being able to very quickly pop in and print something out or share to your clients. Okay, so we can, the possibilities there are endless. All right, so what happens when I go to actually pull it into a loop? I'm going to go back to the main page. And let's say we're going to add a loop, steps listing. And of course, normally you're going to be using the address of the property. Okay, when I pull the loop, it would be a listing. And so when I go to the templates to pull my documents in, instead of going down and using the regular PA listing packet that I would normally be using, instead I'm going to use my listing documents, select everything, copy it over. Now I only have 17 rather than the original 21. And you can see it came in exactly the order that I wanted it to be in with the names that I gave it. And this time when I go to pull the listing contract and put information in, I have the ability to autofill based on the seller and my information that I put into there. But when I go down and look, there's all that pre-filled information. And like I said, if for some reason I decided that I was going to take a higher percentage, then I can just type in at that point. Okay. Any questions about that? And does that help? It's going to shave loads of time. Now, there are a lot of the other disclosures and things that come along with that when you're doing the listing or the buyer side. A lot of it is property specific or person specific, so don't get crazy about overdoing it with the pre-fill. But there's a good chunk of our pages that is basically the same entry over and over again. Any thoughts on that? Okay, not quite group yet. Okay, so another thing that we can do in the templates section, so I'm going to just go back to the main page here. Back over here where we were doing the templates, I want to show you a couple of other things that you can pre-fill and work on as well. If you go down way down below all of these different document libraries, there are actually two other little places here where you have some shortcuts. One is tasks and one is clauses. In the tasks, and in some of your offices, you may have noticed your admins using this task functionality where it will tell you you still need to do these things or the admin needs to do these things. You also have the ability to create tasks for yourself. So when I open that up, you can see that there are some admin versions. So this would be my admin, and she probably tags this on to whatever transactions I turn in to remind herself of things to do with it. But I can create my own. So here again, I'm going to hit add task list. And this is really helpful for you if you need something to kind of jog your memory about the different pieces in the process that you need to do. So for example, I'm going to say my buyer task list, we'll call it. Okay. And then maybe what I'm thinking of in my mind is the next steps after ratification. Okay, like I got to remind myself that I need to do these things right after I have somebody under contract. So let's say I need to remind myself to send clients ratified docs. Okay, and once I have put it in there, I have the ability to assign it, which would be helpful in team situations. I can also give myself a due date. Okay, when is this due? All right, and then of course rename or delete it if I need to make adjustments. And that's say collect earnest money and maybe deliver earnest money and order inspections. Okay, so I can have all of these be at a certain time or at a certain date or after another task if necessary, but otherwise they just go in there as a list and reminds me, and then I check them off as I get them done. So it's a really great way to, especially for the Accelerate people on the call, to kind of take the task lists that we give you and put it into a mechanism that will just always remind you for each transaction. Okay, so then I'm going to hop back once again to that loop just so that you can see how you would attach that to your loop. Now I know this is a listing, we're just going to pretend for a second that it isn't. When I scroll down here to the bottom, there's a place here to add tasks. And I'm going to hit load template, and it's going to ask me which task list I want to attach to this, and it's going to be my buyer task list in this case. Okay, so then I would have tasks associated to this particular sale. And then as I was doing them, I would mark them off. Okay, and sometimes you will see your admins have them on there as well. Any questions about the task list? All right, last thing in the templates section, scrolling way down below again, one more for clauses. And clauses are so helpful, especially in today's world where we've got some really crazy stuff going on that buyers are willing to do, and they're offering up all kinds of stuff. And the lawyers in-house have been so helpful to us because sometimes we'll just like throw something into additional terms like, oh, well, my buyer will pay the difference between the appraisal value and the purchase price. Well, there's a lot of other stuff that may play into that, or they may have like a certain cap or limit to which they're willing to pay out of pocket. And sometimes we don't think about all of these things. So it's been a blessing to us that we have in-house counsel that thinks of those other little caveats for us. Therefore, they've written for us a bunch of clauses all around these different ideas that we've been grappling with as agents. For example, you have a situation where a seller needs to find suitable housing. And suitable housing is very debated hotly all throughout the footprint. So if you have to use it, this paragraph was written by the lawyers to help us kind of work through that and give it a little bit more depth. This is one for the buyer is going to proceed with the agreement regardless of the appraisal amount, but you have to be careful because you need to still tweak this to be, you can't just like copy paste this and walk away. All right, so there's a blank that needs to be filled out, and there are instructions in the parentheses, and maybe you don't want to have a specific piece of it in here and you take some of it out. So you have to be careful about that. But a lot of these things that you guys have been throwing into the agreement of sale have more meaty paragraphs here for you to use, and we do recommend it. And I'll show you how to pull that into your agreement of sale here shortly. And you can create your own. So here's a couple that I created. Repairs totaling 300 or less will not be asked of the seller, or the seller is to provide a warranty. So I would hit add new clause. And maybe and the reason for the clause is that you don't have to keep typing the same thing over and over again. When you have a buyer like in today's market where you know the situation and you have to keep writing offers and they're not winning, it just makes it faster and easier for you to grab that language and stick it into the agreement of sale without having to type it every single time. So let's say that I'm working with a family member. I would say this, agent related to buyer. So instead of me having to type that into the agreement of sale every time we try for a property, I can just start the sentence and it will find the clause and stick it in for me. Okay, so there's an option there. So how can I pull the clauses into one of my agreement of sales? I'm going to go back to the loop. All right, in this case, we have an agreement of sale here that I would be using. I'm not going to autofill at the moment. And way down the bottom, if I wanted to start typing something in here, like agent is related to the buyer, I start typing agent. And anywhere that there is the word agent in one of the clauses, it's going to try to pre-fill for me. And there's the one that I want, agent is related to the buyer. Okay. But I can also potentially find it by clicking this little button right here. Do you see it? There's like a little dual pane window and it says add clause. So if I'm not sure like what language I used and I can't find it, then I just hit the little button and I can scroll through and find what I'm looking for and add it. And then I can go through and continue to edit it and make it specific to this offer. Any questions about that? And do you see some value there in not having to type this every time? And the little button was right up here, this little dual pane window. It says add clause. Melissa learns something new every time. Was this like the 13th time you've sat through this? Okay, so that's all of the pre-fill kind of stuff that you can do, and you're setting all of that stuff up. Oh, it wants me to save. You're setting all that stuff up in the templates section of your loop. How do we feel about that? Is that good? Thumbs up. Is that going to be helpful? It's going to save so much time. Okay, next up that I want to talk about is a frustration that happens with agents all the time. You receive an agreement of sale from an agent who does not use dotloop, and it comes to you in PDF format. And then you're like, oh my God, I have to go through this and put all of the little initial boxes and signatures and all these different things so that I can use it in dotloop with my sellers. Well, we have a little trick that's going to help you with that. I have an agreement of sale in here as a PDF. Okay, so this came in from an agent who does not work in dotloop. So when I get it, I can't do anything. I can't click, my seller can't sign, nothing can happen. And what agents have been doing is using the add functionality and hitting add initials and putting it in the box and assigning the field to whoever. Okay. But in this case, we're not going to do that. And here's another thing Melissa just learned the last time I'm going to show you. If you place a box and you were like, oh crap, I didn't mean to place that box there, I don't want it. When you click it, you have a black menu here, and with different boxes, it will have different things in it, but there is an X that will have you completely delete that away. There you go. I taught Larry something today. So it will go away. I've seen some agents like pull it off to the side or try to drop it down or cover it up. I'm like, what? Just delete it. It's fine. It's gone.
I tried to shrink it.
You tried to shrink it. Okay. Thank you for being honest. Now, very quickly, I'm just going to toss a buyer in here and make myself the buying agent. And we're going to put Melissa in here as my buyer, just because I want you guys to be able to see how it also autofills. Okay. All right, so I have this agreement of sale. It comes in from this other agent. They're not using dotloop. So how can I make this faster? You're going to File, Apply Template. You're going to go to the PA All Docs library. And you're going to search for the word signatures. And when you do that, I don't know why there's two of the property disclosure, just ignore it, just pick one, they're both the same. I thought that too, but it's not. They just duplicated it for some reason. So you have two options. One for the seller disclosure, which by itself is amazing because I hear all the time, I got to pull it from Bright. I can't do anything with it. It's so annoying. So I'm going to show you that here in a second too. But in this case, I'm going to be using the one that is marked for agreement of sale. Okay, and when I hit apply, ta-da, I now have initial boxes. And then I can take it one step further and go ahead and hit the autofill button. Oh, whoops. Let me switch here. And now Melissa has a place to sign, just like that. And it's set to be correct for the whole document. So when I go down to the end, the signatures are in the right place. Now, of course, the placement of the initials and the signatures is going to be very dependent on how it was scanned to you. So if the agent kind of scanned it and it's a little wonky, then your signatures and your initial boxes aren't going to be perfectly aligned. That's up to you, how OCD you want to be about that, but you can certainly move them around and fix it if you want to, or leave them wherever they fall, as long as they're on the page in the vicinity of the initials. Okay. Any questions about that?
Yeah, do that whole process over again real quick.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're going to open the offending PDF. Make sure it didn't work. Oh, shucks, it didn't let me go back and do the other one. That's why I had to. I noticed it's been doing that to me. Okay, so I have the offending PDF. I'm going to file, apply template. We're going to the PA All Docs library. And you are going to search for the word signature. When you do that, you get a couple of options. You are looking for the one for standard agreement of sale, and you'll select that. And hit apply. And when you do that, your initial boxes will be set. And then you would take the final step and hit autofill so that your seller's initials pop in where they belong. Much faster than adding initial boxes. Okay, any other questions about that? The same thing exists for the seller disclosure, which is a bigger problem, I think, for most agents, is this concept of having to go and pull this document out of Bright that's coming from the seller that's obviously a scanned document and is not dotloop ready. So here's a seller disclosure I pulled from Bright, and you have the same problem. I want to be able to send all my documents to my buyer to sign, and this is not dotloop friendly. So how can I make it dotloop friendly? Again, I open it up, I go to File, Apply Template, PA All Docs, search for signatures, and this time I'm going to select one of these property disclosure ones. And when I apply that, there's the buyer initials. And remember how I said it's only as good as the scan. So it's set to be exactly where it should be on a blank form, and it does not quite match the scan. So I can move them around if I want to or need to. And once again, when I hit autofill, Melissa will show up and she will be ready to sign. And this is, again, perfectly set up for the whole page because at the very bottom, there are all of the signatures. So much faster when you're desperately trying to get it done and get your offer in. Any other questions about that process? The only caveat to this that you have to be aware of, go back to the agreement of sale, is that I want you to think about this like an invisible cloak almost. This is basically another agreement of sale with the dotloop signatures and everything, but the agreement of sale part of it is invisible. So you're like covering your agreement of sale with this new one with the signatures on it. So why is that important? If you need to counter offer for whatever reason, you want to make sure you do the striking out and the adding and everything after you've applied the template. Because if you go through and put all your counter offer bits in here, and I come in here and I add a strike through and I cross this out, and then I add a text box with the new amount that I want to put in there, and so on and so forth, and then I apply the template, I will have covered it all up. Okay, so you want to apply the template first and then do your counter offer pieces. Okay, and then you can assign that. All good there? That's how it works. Great. All right, another thing that is commonly asked, and it's an opportunity for me to remind you that if you have not yet signed up or joined the Home Sale Loopers page, Facebook page, you should certainly do that. It's our own home sale dotloop. I have questions, I don't know what to do with this situation kind of thing. So if you haven't joined that, you definitely should. Excuse me. You'll see a lot of questions on there. And one of the questions that I see commonly is, how do I handle third parties, POAs, estates, executors and executrixes? How do I put those people in on the contracts? And you guys have come up with some really interesting means of making that happen. There's a lot of very interesting, not always legal, not always right. So let's talk about, how do you handle these weird like third party situations where somebody else is actually the one signing and it is not the name of the seller or the buyer. Okay, so how that is supposed to work is fairly simple. The seller is always the seller. Let's start with that. Okay, so if Stephanie Eckhart owns this house and Stephanie Eckhart becomes incapacitated in some way that Melissa has to sign on my behalf, I'm still here. I still own this house. I just can't sign for myself anymore. So you should not be listing the property in Melissa's name. It's not her house. And that's what a lot of agents are doing, because of the fact that they're like, well, Melissa has to sign and I can't find Stephanie and it needs to be Melissa's contact information. That's not how this works. Okay, so here, just to make things super clear, let me take her off for a second. I'm gonna do an add person, and Stephanie is the person who owns this property. Did I spell that right? Close enough. Stephanie Eckhart, incapacitated, right? And that's not what this is, just for you guys to know, all right? Otherwise, the name would be the name. It's always the name. Stephanie Eckhart owns this house. In this case, she's incapacitated. Somebody else is going to be signing on her behalf. Okay, so then you're going to put that signing person. Okay, so Stephanie Eckhart goes in there. Stephanie's POA at email.com is the contact information. That's where it's going to go. That person is the seller. Okay, that's how it goes in there. Stephanie Eckhart is the seller. The contact information is that of the POA. Okay. Same exact thing if it's an executor situation. Stephanie Eckhart is the seller. Okay, and then it's the executor contact information. You're already connected with an email address and it's going to mess dotloop up. I have tried that, it doesn't work. But I will do host in person so they can see. Okay, so there's another seller situation. Okay, what about if it's an LLC? Right, there's another opportunity. What happens if it's an LLC? Well, then you're putting it in there as LLC. Properties of York, LLC. Oh, I think I made one up already previously. Yeah, there we go. All right, so Property Group LLC. The email address is going to be that of the person who is authorized to sign. When you have an LLC situation, you have to remember to always ask very soon about the articles of incorporation, and that will tell you who is supposed to sign on behalf of the LLC. Sometimes it's one person, sometimes it's multiple people. Okay, and when it gets to be multiple people, that requires a little bit more manual massage here. But for the most part, you'll be putting in property group, the LLC as the full name, and then the email address of the person who's supposed to sign. Okay, and so on and so forth. Any questions about that before I show you how this works? Okay. So what does it look like when I go to send it? And this is where it's really important. You guys have to learn how to coach your clients. Too many times we're just like, oh, it's fine. I'm just gonna like throw this into the loop and I'm gonna send it to you. Just go ahead and sign whatever. And we're forgetting that we need to make sure that we're coaching our clients and explaining to them and telling them what needs to happen. Okay, so I've got this whole listing contract all filled out. The seller is still the owner or the LLC, whichever it is. The contact information is just different. The phone number would be for whoever the POA is. The email address is for whoever the POA is. Okay, now I am going to do a little process here that I don't want you to be doing in regular life, but I want you to see what it looks like when the person on the other side gets it. Okay. So I have sent this to Stephanie's POA. Stephanie's POA opens it and there's this button here that says start signing. And the first place that Stephanie's POA goes to click, it's going to say, is this what you want your contacts information to look like? Well, no, because I'm not Stephanie, right? I'm the POA. I'm somebody else acting on behalf of Stephanie. So you need to coach that person. Hey, when you go to sign that first place, it's going to jump up and ask you to sign, but you know you're not that person. So I need you to override. And that's how they do it. Okay, that's how they do it. And so then moving forward, every single place that they go to sign has Melissa's information on it instead. Okay, so I'll go all the way down so you can see how it signs the bottom. Click, click, click. There you go. Melissa McCoy POA is the person who signed on behalf of me. Does that make sense? Same thing with the LLC. The seller name or the buyer name might be whatever LLC. The person who signs it has to override that signature box to be their actual name. Does that make sense to everybody? We good there? And that's the right way to do it. Okay, we don't do wacky stuff. We don't have people who aren't actually sellers or actually buyers in those capacities. That's not how this works. Okay, they just need to be coached, and a lot of people are not doing that. Okay. You also need to tell your people just to X out of all of these little pop-ups when they're done. That's super annoying. Okay, now we're going to move on to one more little housekeeping thing before we're finished for today. Unless there are any other questions about how to handle POAs and third parties, because I know sometimes that gets everybody tripped up. No questions? Good. Okay. All right. So lastly, and one of my biggest pet peeves, guys, oh my gosh. I do have a lot of pet peeves. This is one of my biggest ones. And I know it's one of your biggest ones because several of you, you're probably already starting to like run into this, the double loop. Okay, the double loop, horrible, the bane of all agents' existence. And I try so hard to train as many people within our home sale footprint as I possibly can. So at least with each other, we're avoiding that problem. So tell your friends to be on this call next time. You have a listing and you put it out there and all of a sudden you get all of these like extra loops into your dot loop and you can't use the stuff, right? You have to take everything out from that person's loop and put it back into your loop. And sometimes you can end up with 2, 3, 4 different loops, all for the same property. It's difficult. On the other hand, you might be doing that to somebody else. You're writing on an offer for your buyer and you go to send it to the listing agent And that's all fine and dandy. And then when the listing agent sends you something back, suddenly you have 2 loops. Why is that? Because you're not connecting to each other correctly. That's it. When we're teaching dotloop, I'm telling everybody from the start that the setup, the foundation piece that takes 30 seconds right when you set your loop up is the most critical moment, because if you don't do that right, you're not going to connect correctly. So what do I mean by that? This is a 2-part responsibility. The listing agent, primarily, their responsibility is right here, the status. You have to have your listing as active in dotloop, even if you are in coming soon status. Okay, and I think that sometimes messes with people's heads. Being active in dotloop is not the same thing as being active in MLS. You're not doing anything to the MLS. All you're doing is activating this loop so that the rest of the agents can see it and work with it. So you can do that right from the start. My advice is always to skip this whole pre-listing, private listing thing, because if you can't remember to change it right from the beginning, it's going to be messed up. So when you're getting the listing, make it active. And then if you don't get it or it doesn't work out, terminate it, get rid of it, archive it, whatever. But at least make it active quickly so that other people can write. Can you write offers on coming soons without seeing them? Yep. Yes. You can write an offer on a coming soon. You just can't see a coming soon. And I see a lot of agents will put things in as coming soon and they will not activate the dot loop, and you're going to get double loops. Okay, so I'm going to make that active listing. What happens on the buy side though? That is also a huge responsibility. My buyer wants to purchase a property. So I'm in here and I'm creating the loop, and they want to purchase this particular property. Which one is the right one? Thoughts on that? I have a lot of options here. There's a Google Maps, there's a Bright MLS, there's this other one for
Bright MLS.
the Bright MLS. Who agrees? Hands up or thumbs up reactions. None? That would be incorrect.
Oh,
Wouldn't it be the dot loop one?
It would be the dot loop one.
dot loop one. Yeah, I forgot that.
Good job, Kira. Because if you pick any one of anything else, double loops. And it's like everybody wants to do this. Seems right. It screams, this is right, because it says Bright MLS on it. The only time we would ever be selecting the Bright MLS version is if there is no dot loop version, meaning it's a company that does not use dot loop. Okay, now I know Jennifer Clemens does and should have a dot loop because she works at home sale. So if I'm working with another home sale agent and I start putting the address in and I don't have this option, that does not mean I should default to the Bright MLS. Why? Because I'm going to make double loops. Okay, so I'm going to call Jennifer Clemens and I'm going to be like, hey, Jen, I'm getting ready to write an offer on your property. And for some reason, be nice about it. For some reason, it's not showing up as available for a dot loop connection. Would you mind popping in real quick and looking to see, do you have it marked in dot loop as an active listing so I can connect? Okay, it's gentle, it's kind, and it saves everybody a lot of headache. Okay. Can you hear Melissa, or does she need to scream? Oh yeah, the listing agent absolutely will appreciate it if you're doing it correctly, because they also get double loops. If you're getting them, they're getting them, and everybody hates it. So yeah. Yeah, sometimes it's uncomfortable to reach out, but everybody's going to be so much more happy for it. Okay, so I'm going to connect to her dot loop listing, and then when I do that, it's going to pull over and everything will be just fine. Okay, that way when we're working with each other, it's in one loop. Oh yes, sometimes people get really freaked out about this concept. They're worried that if I connect to an agent, that I'm going to be able to see things that I shouldn't see. So I'm linked to the listing. I can see that there's a listing agent here, but when you go out to the loop, there's nothing here. I'm not seeing anything that Jen Clemens has in her folder. Nothing is here that I shouldn't be seeing. It just means that I have access to transactional information that I should have. Like, who is the listing agent? How much is the house worth or being sold for? Like that kind of stuff. And it just makes it so we can connect. Right, and she can't see me. If I'm starting to put documents in here, she can't see that until I share it with her. All right, so don't be freaked out about that. It's supposed to work like this. Okay, so that's the biggest lesson I think that's most important for you guys. Listing agents, you have to have it marked as active listing. Buying agents, you have to do the dotloop source. Okay, and if one is not available, it's because the agent doesn't have it activated, or it's not a company that uses dotloop, and then it's okay because it won't matter. Nobody's getting double loops. Okay. All right. That is the presentation. Does anyone have any questions? Or any dotloop problems that you have a burning question about? That's a dangerous one.
My only question is when you log in with another loop, do they see that you did that? Like, does the listing agent see it before you put your offer in? Connected to the loop?
No, typically not. Like, it doesn't give some kind of like so-and-so has connected to the loop unless you share something.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Great question. Anything else? Okay. I hope that was helpful to you guys. I know we covered a lot of different things. You may have to take it one more time just to kind of like really let that sink in. I hope y'all took notes. As always, we're here for you if you have any questions, and we will see you next time. Thank y'all for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks, Steph.
Bye.
Thank you.